So hi, I'm Mark Powell. I'm currently a non-executive director. I'm on the board of a number of companies, 2 ASX listed companies, JB Hi-Fi and a company called Bapco, which is an automotive parts distributor. I'm also on the board of 7-Eleven in Australia, which is a large private company there. And in New Zealand, I'm on the board of NZX listed Kiwi Property Group. So that's from a professional perspective. I moved into non-executive roles about just over 5 years ago. I was the CEO of the Warehouse Group for about 5 years, and before that the CEO of Warehouse Stationery. Much longer history before that, originally from the UK, from South Wales. Started out in underground coal mining, moved into retail and logistics in the late 1980s, so it dates me a bit. Married to a wonderful wife, Maria, for the last 32 years and got 2 daughters who are now 30 and 29. And 2 grandchildren as well. So I'd emigrated to New Zealand in late 2002, overseas. We'd always knew we wanted to be settled before our daughter started high school. When we moved to New Zealand, I started asking bigger questions of life. You know, what is life all about? And my wife had always had a strong Christian faith, and I'd started exploring that as well. And I was, at that sort of time, I was considering whether I would take time out and do a degree in theology at that time, which I did do. I went down to 1 day a week with a Warehouse Group for 3 years. I did a degree in theology. So that was all going on at the same time. You know, so I was, you know, there's some bigger questions rather than just work going on, should we say. And you know, after that, I came back into the Warehouse Group and took over at Warehouse Stationery. But there was that 3-year gap, which really kicked in not long after all this. I attended ISL pretty much in my early days in the Warehouse Group. In 2004, actually, I was one of the early ones to do the ISL program down in Millbrook, sorry. Yeah, I was head of supply chain for the Warehouse Group. I'd stood in as CEO of their disastrous Australian venture. I was interim CEO for 7 months, came back, and in early 2004, I think I had a discussion with the lead chief people officer, and I think they'd sent 1 or 2 already on the ISL program, and I can't remember, it's a long time ago. I went on the program, yeah, it would have been early, mid-2004. I've always enjoyed learning and development. I've seen life as a journey of learning and development. Bit of extreme, I've got 5 degrees, so it's a bit extreme, ranging from engineering through to management, logistics and theology and philosophy. So I enjoy learning, and yeah, it seemed interesting. I'd heard good things about it, and yeah, who could not want a week in Millbrook as well? Yeah, we'd done some pre-work, which is obviously some of the instruments used on personality and psychometrics. You turn up. The interesting part is you're not to say what you do. I think they still do that, which I think is really good, because you don't get put in a box and labelled, or you're the finance person, you're the marketing person, all that. So, you know, you don't know what anyone does, and you introduce, then you put it into groups. Yeah, how did I feel? Struggling to remember, really. Part of me was in a bit of a transitionary space as well around my role. I'd been in Australia with the Warehouse Group, come back, a few other things going on in my life, so I was also rethinking some things. Yeah, but like the start of anything, new people, you don't know really what's going to happen, what it's going to happen. So there's probably a little bit of, oh, this will be interesting. Yeah. Well, I think there's 2 components, and I'm not, you know, they've probably developed and continuously improved the program since then. But the real 2 key components were personal understanding and understanding of others, and then put into a group, and then given some strategy stuff and put under pressure to do a strategy case study. The group was quite a different, you know, all very different. And at that stage, I was in my early 40s then. You're still developing. And part of that development is understanding yourself and understanding others, and the difference of people come at things. And I'm quite a planful person. I like to get structure on time and that. And one of the things I do remember, and I don't mean this in an egotistic way, but I just said, you know, we were given the case study, and I just said on the whiteboard, well, we got this amount of time, let's break it down. And it was interesting that people thought, oh, that's a really wonderful way of approaching it. I thought, well, it's just natural. But also then, you know, some of them worked very different to me, you know, and I remember a couple of them were very creative. I'd done previous courses at Harvard, done an MBA. I thought the quality was excellent, and from that, in the future, I always recommended people to do it. I think for me, it helped with my personal self-understanding. I'd come to New Zealand, I'd worked in North America and Britain, and I'd worked in very direct cultures. You know, cultures where, in retailers, in large retailers, you know, my division in Tesco was bigger than the whole of the warehouse group. It was 15,000 people. And it was very direct, not inappropriate. You know, I'd started in underground coal mining. I was a bit puzzled by New Zealand culture. New Zealanders, in my view, and I love New Zealand, I'm a New Zealand citizen, they don't like conflict. They are very conflict averse. The warehouse group at that time, I found a lot of things went on in corridors, not in open meetings, and I was struggling with that, quite frankly. You know, for me, you put stuff on the table, you debate it, and for the first time in my career, I could tell I was having a negative impact on people. You know, and I'd never experienced that. Yeah. And it helped me understand a bit of that as well, around my impact. It wasn't my intent, but it helped me understand, hey, this is a different culture. It's quite deceptive when you move to an English-speaking country, because you assume it's going to be the same. And it's actually can be, I'd worked in Spain for a year, I'd run a business as CEO in Madrid. You expect a difference, so you're very alert to it. When you work in another English-speaking country, you're not as alert, and you make too many assumptions. And so I found that really interesting, and it was very helpful in that, in terms of forcing me to step back and say, whoa, hold on here, what is the dynamic going on here? And yeah, it was part of that as well. So a long answer, but you know, those are some of the things that come back even as I'm talking now. Yeah. When you're in your early part of your career, your 30s, you know, in particular, you're task focused, you tend to deliver. In some ways you're not really thinking about the overall business strategy, and you get stuff done, and sometimes, you know, that's what gets you promoted. As you get more senior, you're increasingly having to work cross-functionally, increasingly having to work with difference rather than just running your area and that's it. And I think at that stage for me, I was early 40s, it was very helpful in that self-understanding and understanding of others and team dynamics, number one. Number two, and I think this is underestimated actually, the strategic frameworks given are really good. You know, I've done an MBA, I've done strategy courses, but it's nice and simple, what was produced by Jeff and the team. And that was really good as well, and that's often not talked about because people are very impacted by the team dynamics and learning about themselves and others. But the strategy stuff as well was really good as a simple framework to approach strategy as well. So those are two of the things that probably stick with me. It was very concise, clear and simple, you know, and combined it with the team dynamics aspect and combined with having a case study that put you under pressure, that brings together strategy and dynamics. Whereas you take the 2-week program I did at Harvard on retail strategy. It was all case studies in a big room that you'd read, and it was very much more individualistic rather than team, and no elements of self-understanding aspects or culture or dynamics. So just really more strategic frameworks, and even an MBA is much more like that. It's a theoretical frameworks that you relate them to your role. I was in some senior roles when I was doing my MBA. But this, in a very compact, short time, brought both those people and strategy aspects together really well, I thought. Yeah. People sort of, you know, I think when they reach their 30s and 40s, you know, they think, oh, it's all so uncertain, and we see this in the media. Everything's so uncertain, as if this is new. Well, it was pretty uncertain in the 1940s. It was pretty uncertain in the 1970s when we had 20% inflation. You know, it's just, I think, new generations end up in the leadership point where they're faced with that. And so it becomes like, oh, this is a big deal. It's always there. So just be comfortable with that. You can't change that. But what you can do is equip yourself in your knowledge, in your wisdom, in mental concepts, in understanding yourself, understanding other people, recognizing where your strengths are but how they can be overplayed, and recognizing how you need other strengths around you to approach that, and not feel any pressure in that. You're just problem solving and opportunity identifying, but you need to equip yourself to be able to do that and be comfortable with the uncertainty of results. And you may not be successful. Well, whoopsie-doo. You just take on issues and address them. So equip yourself for that, I suppose what I'm trying to, in a long-winded way, get to. And part of that, ISL, that 2 weeks, was part of equipping. And I think most people enter in, when they start out, they think they've got to know everything, they think they've got to have all the answers, they think they've got to be this expert, which is a massive fallacy, because you can't be in everything. And I think you've got to develop yourself, and you've got to be taking in ideas and learning to grow. Otherwise, you'll get smaller, you'll feel more pressure, and ultimately you'll be a poor leader. And leadership is critical. When I became CEO of Warehouse Station and the Warehouse Group, even when I was running logistics, I directed a number of people into the program. When they did the ISL mini MBA, I sponsored somebody on that as well. But because of the holistic nature of it, I suck up learning. So I'd enjoy the experience, and it'd be interesting to see how the program itself has developed. So there's never anything wrong in going back and redoing and reminding. So yeah, I would. Yeah. But I'm not sure I'd prioritise that investment at this stage.